We started off our considerations in our first talk thinking about longevity and how long these family of faith lasted. Just to set our stall again with regards to what we looked at in the first session, but particularly thinking about the dates and just to remember what length of period of time that these families were going for. So we started off thinking about Jethro and how he was a man very much given to hospitality, the priest of Midian. So we're about BC 1500 approximately with Jethro. We then took it forward to Hobab, the eyes of the nation, guiding them to the promised land about 40 years on. We then jump to Jael, so BC 1235-ish, and her great courage and faith in killing Sisera and striking that nail through Sin's forehead, as it were. And then we've got Jabez, who wanted to be part of the promises to Abraham. And Jabez, I haven't even hazarded a guess as to when he might have lived. We don't have any indications of it. But then we do have that reference that we went to with Saul. Remember that Saul showed kindness to the Kenites. He was fulfilling the promise that had been given to Hobab. So around about BC 1028. So the Kenites went for a period of something like 500 years. It's a long time, isn't it, brothers and sisters? That's how long the Kenites were there. So we looked at that link verse. I'm going to put it on the screen again because it's a really important one. If we didn't have this verse in Chronicles, in 1 Chronicles 2:55, I don't think any of us would make the link between the Kenites and our second session subject, that of the Rechabites. These are the Kenites that came of Hemath, the father of the house of Rechab. And we spoke in the first session about the significance of the names of these two, the Kenites, the Smiths, the blacksmiths, the Rechabites. However, the Rechab having this connection with chariots, and the word Rechab, chariot, meaning to ride, and that becomes very significant as we go into the Rechabites now. And the founding father of the Rechabites, which wasn't a man called Rechab, it was actually a man called Jonadab. So let's go then into Kings this time, and into 2 Kings and chapter 9. So we're jumping forward in the record to the time when the house of Ahab was strong, when wickedness in the land was great. There was great apostasy in the land at this time. And some years earlier, it had been prophesied that the apostasy of Ahab would be removed by a man called Jehu, the son of Nimshi. If you want the passage, it's 1 Kings 19, verse 16 and 17 that gives us that. But I'd like to pick up the record in 2 Kings chapter 9, and we're going to look at verse 20, or verse 19 for connection. Then he sent out a second on horseback, which came to him and said, "Thus saith the king, is it peace?" And Jehu answered, "What hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me." Verse 20, and the watchman told, saying, "He cometh even unto them, and he cometh not again. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he driveth furiously." So Jehu was a chariot driver. He was known for his speed and his aggression with his driving, and I'm sure we all know some Jehu drivers. Might be one yourself, I don't know. I've been accused of it from time to time. So that was his characteristic. He had this real passion, this real zeal. He drove his chariot furiously. And Jehu's mission was to kill Ahab. Jehu's mission was to eradicate apostasy, the house of Ahab, out of the land. And when we come into 2 Kings chapter 10, Jehu engages the help of the man that we're going to consider, this man Jonadab. So 2 Kings chapter 10 and verse 15. And when he was departed thence, and this is talking about Jehu, he lighted on Jonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him, And he saluted him and said, Is thine heart right as my heart is with thy heart? And Jonadab answered, It is. Okay, so Jehu's asking Jonadab if they're aligned. So what was in Jehu's heart? Well, Jehu's heart was to eradicate the apostasy, to eradicate the house of Ahab. And Jonadab here is saying that, yes, I'm with you, Jehu. I'm aligned to your mission. I'm going to help you with your mission. And so Jonadab now engages with Jehu. And Jonadab, as we read in Jeremiah 35, that he's regarded as the father of the Rechabites. Now, we need to just stop there a minute, because Jonadab, he's the son of Rechab. But why weren't they called Jonadabites? Other than that it's quite difficult to say. They weren't referred to as Jonadabites. Other families, so the one we're looking at this afternoon, Asaph, family of Asaph. Asaph was the founding father. He was the one that the family was named after. Korathites in a similar way. But here, Jonadab, although he's the prominent figure, the family's named after Jonadab's father, after Rechab, but we don't know anything about Rechab. So why is that? Well, the significance, as you probably gathered, it's in the name of what Rechab means. And it comes out now in as we move on in verse 15. So Jonadab's given this affirmation to Jehu, it is, if it be, give me thine hand. And he gave him his hand, and he took him up to him into the chariot. Okay, so Jonadab then, he's going up into Jehu's chariot, and the word chariot there at the end of verse 15 is the other word for chariot. It's the word Merkabah that we looked at in our first session. Then verse 16, and he said, come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. And Jehu was a very zealous man, wasn't he? He had great passion for the things of the Lord. So they made him ride in his chariot. And there's a play on words here, brothers and sisters, because Jonadab's name means Yahweh is willing. And Jonadab is the son of Rechab. He's the son of a rider. And what Jehu is asking him here, he's saying, so they made him ride, that's the word Rechab. So the son of the rider, come and ride in his chariot, in his Rechab. It's the same Hebrew word again. So there's this play on words here, that it was to be the Rechab, this rider. They were going to be riders for the Lord. And the chariot of Jehu was going to play a very important role in eradicating the apostasy. So Jonadab aligns himself with Jehu, and he does exactly what he said he would do. He helps Jehu. So what did they do? Well, verse 23, and Jehu went, and Jonadab the son of Rechab, into the house of Baal, and said unto the worshippers of Baal, search and look that there be with you none of the servants of the Lord, but the worshippers of Baal only. Can you imagine that great gathering, all of those false prophets in there, and they're checking to make sure that there wasn't any true worshippers in that house. And once they're satisfied that it's only the prophets of Baal in that house, what do? Verse 25, it came to pass, as soon as he made an end of offering the burnt offering, that Jehu said to the guard and to the captains, go in and slay them, let none come forth. And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and the guard and the captains cast them out, and went to the city of the house of Baal. And they brought forth the images out of the house of Baal, and burned them, and they brake down the images of Baal, and brake down the house of Baal, and made it a draught house, or a toilet house, unto this day. So they won a great victory. They helped purge the land from these false prophets. And it's not without coincidence, brothers and sisters, that it seems that the majority of Ahab's family, if not all of Ahab's family, were killed in some connection with chariots. That they were killed in some connection with Rechabs, with these riders, with chariots. We'll put them up on the screen. We won't turn to all the passages. You might like to do that in your own time. You remember Ahab himself. He went into battle, didn't he? And he was wounded in battle while he was in his chariot, while he was in his Rechab. And 1 Kings 22 verse 37 says that he died in his Rechab, and there was blood at the bottom of the chariot. Ahab's son Joram in 2 Kings 9 verse 24, that he was killed in a chariot, that he was killed in a Rechab. Azariah, connected with Ahab, was killed in a chariot in 2 Kings 9 verse 27 and 28. And also, let's not forget Ahab's wife, wicked Queen Jezebel. How did she meet her end? Well, she was thrown out of a window and she was trodden underfoot by horses. No specific mention of chariots, but we get the connection. Let's go back to, let's go forward rather, to 2 Kings chapter 13. Just a little thought for you. 2 Kings 13, verse 14. This is Elisha speaking here. Now Elisha was fallen sick of his sickness, whereof he died. And Joash the king of Israel came down unto him and wept over his face and said, O my father, the chariot of God and the horsemen thereof. And we can always think of the angelic host here, chariot of God, chariot of Israel and the horsemen thereof. But also let's think of it in connection with Jehu. Let's think of it in connection with Jonadab and his father Rechab, the Rechabites, the riders of the Lord, in removing this apostasy out of Israel. So what Jonadab did was very much aligned with what Jael had done, his ancestor, in removing Sisera out of the land as well. So that's our start. So that's what Jonadab did. Well, where do we go to next? Well, we're going on quite a bit in the record. We're going to around BC 600 now, and we're going to Jerusalem just as Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians are pressing down upon the land. So Jerusalem hasn't fallen yet, but it's getting very close. There's mounting pressure on the Jews and on Jerusalem. And BC 600, we're about 240 years after Jonadab and Jehu, about 550 years after Jael and Heber, and about 700 years after Jethro, the father-in-law to Moses. And it just made me stop and think that if that was us today, that would be tracing the ancestry of the family of the Christadelphians back to the 1300s, back to the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. So over that 700 years, this family is still going, still showing steadfastness to their God. Well, let's go to our reading. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 35, and let's pick up what stance this family is taking here in Jeremiah chapter 35. So Jeremiah 35 and verse 1. The word which came unto Jeremiah from the Lord in the days of Jehoiakim the son of Josiah, king of Judah, saying, Go into the house of the Rechabites and speak unto them, and bring them into the house of the Lord, into one of the chambers, and give them to drink. And what we find is the reason why that they had to be brought into Jerusalem was because the Rechabites here were under threat from the Babylonians. So they had to come into the walls of Jerusalem. And they're given a rather strange test. They're brought into one of the chambers of the Lord in the temple, and they're given wine to drink. Now this isn't a public health and safety test. This wasn't to see if they're keeping the drink and drive rules or drink and ride. They were riders. It's nothing about that at all. So what is it talking about? Well, let's have a look at verse 3. So we're given the introduction. And I took Jaazaniah, the son of Jeremiah, the son of Hasabniah, and his brethren, and all the sons and the whole house of the Rechabites. And I brought them into the house of the Lord, into the chamber of the sons of Hanan, the sons of Igdaliah, a man of God, which was by the chamber of the princes, which was above the chamber of Maaseiah, the son of Shallum, the keeper of the door. We're given all these names, and we're given all the people that were present. And what we find here is that those of Israel, those that were in the house, that all their names, they're good, solid Jewish names, as it were. So Hanan, in verse 4, we're told that the sons of Hanan, Hanan means he is merciful. Igdaliah means Yahweh is great. And we're told that Igdaliah, that he's a man of God. And then we've got Maaseiah, the son of Shallum. Maaseiah, his name means the work of Yahweh. So on the face of it, this is good Jewish stock. These are good Christadelphian family Bible names, as it were. So were they living up to the standards that their name suggests? Well, we're told that Maaseiah was the keeper of the door. Now, if you've got a margin, the word door, it actually means threshold, okay? So that's what he was to be keeper of. That was the role of Maaseiah. He was a keeper of the threshold. And the threshold is the dividing line, isn't it, between the outside world and the house. And by tradition, when a man gets married, I have a vague memory of doing this when I was married some years ago, the tradition has it that a man, when he takes a wife, he carries her over the threshold into his house. And the boundary of the threshold represents the standards of the house. It's the limit of the house. It's saying here and no further. And Maaseiah was responsible for keeping that threshold, that limit of God's house. Well, keep a marker in Jeremiah 35 and come over to Ezekiel 43, please. Let's see if Israel was keeping that standard, that marker of Israel's, of God's house. So Ezekiel 43. We know that Ezekiel was a little bit later than Jeremiah, but similar time. Ezekiel 43. Look what it says in verse 9. In their setting of their threshold by my thresholds, and their post by my posts, and the wall between me and them, they have even defiled my holy name by their abominations that they have committed. Wherefore I have consumed them in mine anger. Now let them put away their whoredom and the carcasses of their kings far from me, and I will dwell in the midst of them forever. See, what Israel had done is that they had taken their own standards, which they'd taken from the nations around them, and they'd made them the standards of God. They'd turned their threshold into God's threshold. They made things comfortable for themselves. They'd watered down the commandments of God. And that's what the world encourages us to do today, isn't it? Encourages us to move our threshold, to move our standards. We need to be so careful that we don't dilute the standards of the truth. So had the Rechabites then, brothers and sisters, young people, had they done the same? Well, let's go back to Jeremiah 35. They've been going for all these hundreds of years. Had they changed? Is anything about the Rechabites different from what was before? Well, Jeremiah 35, verse 5, I set before the sons of the house of Rechabites pots full of wine and cups. And I said unto them, drink ye wine. But they said, we will drink no wine, for Jonadab the son of Rechab, our father, commanded us, saying, ye shall drink no wine, neither ye nor your sons forever. Isn't that amazing, brothers and sisters? Hundreds of years had gone by. The Rechabites drank no wine. Why? Because their father, Jonadab, had told them not to do that. Don't drink any wine. And we might ask the question, well, why? Why were they living this life? Well, remember we said that the Kenites were outside of the covenants of promise, but they wanted to be like Israel. They wanted to be like true Israel. And so maybe Jonadab was thinking of the vow of the Nazarites in Numbers chapter 6. And the Nazarites were commanded, or if you took the vow of the Nazarite, you didn't drink any alcohol. Perhaps Jonadab was thinking that he wanted to be like the priests in the temple, and when the priest went into the temple, Leviticus 10 verse 9, the priest could not consume any wine. And it's a lesson for us, isn't it, today, that Proverbs tells us, Proverbs 20 verse 1, that wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. And the Rechabites decided in their life, because Jonadab had commanded them, that they would abstain from alcohol completely. Why? Because they were the riders for the Lord. But not only did they abstain from wine, but look at verse 7 of Jeremiah 35. Neither shall ye build house, nor sow seed, nor plant vineyard, nor have any, but all your days ye shall dwell in tents, that ye may live many days in the land where ye be strangers. So they are still tent dwellers, going all the way back to the time of Jethro, when Moses went to meet him in the wilderness of Midian. They were living in tents then. Hundreds and hundreds of years later, they're still living in tents. They've been camping for all that period of time. And not only were they living in tents, but also they hadn't had any permanent crops to grow. So they hadn't sown seed, they hadn't planted vineyards. They were still living a true nomadic life. So question, why were they living this way? Why had they chosen to live this way? We'll come over to Hebrews chapter 11. As we've said earlier, the Kenites, the Rechabites, they wanted to be part of the promises to Abraham. And what does the Hebrew man tell us in Hebrews chapter 11, words that we'll know very, very well. Hebrews 11, verse 9. By faith, he, that's Abraham, sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles or in tents, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with them of the same promise. For he looked for the city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. See, the Rechabites, they realised that their abode was not a permanent one, that they were strangers and pilgrims. They were looking for that permanent dwelling which is to come. They were looking for God's kingdom, and they were hoping to be part of God's kingdom through faith. And it's a really salutary lesson to us, isn't it, brothers and sisters? It's not very practical to be camping in this country through the winter, particularly on a day like today. But how comfortable are we in our houses and in our homes? Do we see these things as temporary? Are we ready to give them up at a moment's notice? Mentally, are we pilgrims and sojourners? The Rechabites very literally lived their lives in this way. Let's go back to Jeremiah 35, because Israel had to learn a very painful lesson from the Rechabites. Jeremiah chapter 35 and verse 12. Then came the word of the Lord unto Jeremiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, and tell the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, will ye not receive instruction to hearken to my word, saith the Lord? The words of Jonadab the son of Rechab, that he commanded his sons not to drink wine, are performed unto this day. They drink none, but obey their father's commandments. Notwithstanding, I have spoken unto you, rising up early and speaking, be hearkened not unto me. So we get this great contrast. We get natural Israel not obeying the commands of their Father in heaven, in contrast to these Gentiles, these Rechabites, obeying their Father. What does the fifth commandment say? Well, the fifth commandment says, honour thy father and thy mother. But of course, that's not all of the fifth commandment, because I suspect this would have been well known to the Rechabites, because the fifth commandment goes on to say that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. And I think that's why they were a people of faith, that they wanted to be part of that land. And Israel here, that land was being taken away from them. Nebuchadnezzar was right at the door. Because of their unfaithfulness, Israel was to be punished and taken into captivity. And so because of this great contrast and because of the outstanding faith of the Rechabites, they're blessed. Let's have a look at verse 18 of Jeremiah 35. And Jeremiah said unto the house of the Rechabites, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, because ye have obeyed the commandment of Jonadab your father, and kept all his precepts, and done according unto all that he hath commanded you, therefore thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Jonadab the son of Rechab shall not want a man to stand before me forever. Isn't that amazing, brothers and sisters, that the Rechabites were given an everlasting blessing and that they would stand before God? We're told that Moses and Samuel stood before God. It was the priest that stood before God. And now the Rechabites were going to be promised the same thing. And this was to be something that would last forever. It's interesting to think about who has been given an everlasting promise in the scripture. They're in very high company here, the Rechabites. So what is this everlasting blessing that the Rechabites were given? Well, there is a great longevity of the Rechabites, and there were groups of Rechabites that have popped up throughout history. In fact, if you go to West Bromwich today, there's a building you can go and take a photo of, a Rechabite hall, and there's Rechabite halls all over the country. You can still see it today with that signage. So there were groups of people that tried to follow the same principles of the Rechabites, and this was an abstinence from alcohol that this particular group. So we perhaps got that longevity of the Rechabites, or certain elements of it. But surely this everlasting blessing, brothers and sisters, is something that takes us through to the kingdom, a time when those Rechabites that have died in faith will be raised to stand before Christ in his kingdom forever. So what happened then to the Rechabites after this time? Well, the Rechabites were one of the good figs, and they were taken into captivity. They go into captivity into Babylon. Can you come with me, please, to Psalm 71? Because we've got an intriguing little insight as to the Rechabites in Babylon through the words of this psalm. Psalm 71. Psalm 71, you'll notice in the authorised version there's no heading on this psalm. But in the Septuagint version, the heading of this psalm in the Septuagint version is that this is a psalm of David, but a psalm sung by the sons of Jonadab and the first that were taken captive. Now, if that is right, this is a psalm that the Rechabites sang or knew when they went into captivity, when they went into Babylon. And this psalm, I believe, is so appropriate for the Rechabites and the Kenites that preceded them. Look at verse 1 of Psalm 71. In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Let me never be put to confusion. Deliver me in thy righteousness and cause me to escape. Incline thine ear unto me and save me. So they put their trust in God. Look at verse 7. I am as a wonder unto many, but thou art my strong refuge. And when we think of the behaviour of the Rechabites, they're living in tents, they're not drinking any alcohol. I'm sure they'd have been seen as sort of ultra-extremists, some very odd sects that were sort of ignored, particularly when those of Babylon came down, that I am a wonder. And they would have been a wonder and a curiosity to those that were around them. If we go down to verse 14, but I will hope continually and will yet praise thee more and more. And that hope was to be part of those promises to Abraham. Then in verse 17 and 18, I think we get an insight into how the Rechabites lasted for such a long period of time. Verse 17, O God, thou hast taught me from my youth, and hitherto have I declared thy wondrous works. Now also when I am old and grey-headed, O God, forsake me not until I have showed thy strength unto this generation, and thy power to every one that is to come. You see, Rechabites, as they lived, their desire was to instill their characteristics of faith onto the next generation, onto their children. And I'm sure the Rechabites would have had fantastic Sunday schools, they'd have had wonderful camps. In fact, life was a whole camp for them, wasn't it? They lived in tents, and they instilled this deep devotion to keep their father's commands from generation to generation. And then in verse 20, thou which hast showed me great and sore trouble shalt quicken me again, and shalt bring me up again from the depths of the earth. Thou shalt increase my greatness and comfort me on every side. So through faith, the Rechabites believed in the resurrection. They believed that they would be a people of the land through faith because of their worship of God. So that's perhaps a little insight as to the Rechabites whilst in captivity. They then come back out of captivity. So we're moving on now to around BC 516. So they would have been in captivity for 70 or so years, and then they come back out, back to the land of Israel. Let's go to Nehemiah now, Nehemiah and chapter 3, because we just get a little glimpse of them here in Nehemiah chapter 3. Nehemiah chapter 3 and verse 14. So we're now about 800 years after the time of Jethro and Moses. Nehemiah 3 verse 14, we're simply told, but the dung gate repaired Malchiah, the son of Rechab, the ruler of the part of Beth Hakerem. He built it and set up the doors thereof, the locks thereof, and the bars thereof. So here's this Rechabite back in the land, helping the rest of Israel to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And this Rechabite, he is specifically charged with building or repairing the dung gate. And it doesn't sound very salubrious, that, does it, to repair the dung gate? But the dung gate was used to remove the unwanted parts that were not used in the sacrifices out of Jerusalem. And so in type then, they're removing the waste, they're removing the unwanted parts, they're removing the apostasy still from Israel. That's what the Rechabites are interested to do in building these walls. And Malchiah's name means, my king is Yahweh. And that was foremost in their minds, to keep God's city, to keep God's temple pure from unclean influences. And we're told that Malchiah, that he was the ruler of part of Beth Hakerem. Now Beth Hakerem is quite interesting. We'll conclude pretty shortly, but let's go back to Jeremiah chapter 6. Let's find out about Beth Hakerem. So we've got this man, Malchiah, my king is Yahweh, this Rechabite descendant, and he's ruler of Beth Hakerem. And in Jeremiah chapter 6, we're told about Beth Hakerem, if I can find it. Jeremiah chapter 6, and it's the first verse. O ye children of Benjamin, gather yourselves to flee out of the midst of Jerusalem, and blow the trumpet in Tekoa, and set up a sign of fire in Beth Hakerem. For evil appeareth out of the north, and great destruction. And here's this descendant of Rechab as ruler of this place, Beth Hakerem. And Beth Hakerem was used as a warning when the northern invader comes down. So the job of the people in Beth Hakerem, that when the northern invader comes down, they were to light a fire. And it was a watchtower for the protection of Jerusalem. And how significant, brothers and sisters, that it's a Rechabite that's ruling over this little area. That the Rechabites were entrusted with watching out for the signs of the times. They were watching out for the king of the north to come down. The Rechabites, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later, they were still the eyes of the nation. They were still guiding Israel towards the promised land. And we're entrusted to do the same today, aren't we, brothers and sisters? That we should be like the ruler of Beth Hakerem, watching out for the signs of the times, telling people that the king of the north is coming down, that Russia is in Syria, that Jesus is about to return. There's another aspect to Beth Hakerem which I found fascinating, and that is that Beth Hakerem means the house of vineyard. And the reason why I think that's fascinating is that here we've got a ruler of Beth Hakerem, a son of Rechab, the house of vineyard, but we know the Rechabites did not drink any wine. I just wonder, brothers and sisters, if there's a glimpse of the kingdom here. Remember the words of the Lord Jesus Christ, I will no more drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. And I wonder if the Rechabites, in a similar way, were looking forward to the marriage supper of the Lamb, when they will drink wine with the Lord Jesus in that kingdom to come. So we've covered a lot of ground this morning. We've covered 800 years or so of Kenite, Rechabite history. Let's sort of recap on some of their key characteristics that we can take as exhortation for us in our lives. They were given to hospitality. That comes across very strongly, particularly with the Kenites. They always stood up for the truth. They're there defending the truth and removing apostasy. They were the riders for the Lord in casting out that wickedness from the land. They were the eyes of the people and were prepared to be holy and separate in the way that they lived their lives. They were tent dwellers. They were pilgrims and sojourners waiting for the kingdom, and they instilled their way of life in their children from generation to generation, always obeying their father. And we're told that because of their faith, because of their obedience to their father, that God granted them their request and that they will stand forever before him in his kingdom. So it's incumbent upon all of us in our lives to try to follow their example as Gentiles, waiting through promise and faith for that realisation of Abraham's promises to be realised when Jesus returns back to this earth.